So, we were just watching something on the news that had to do with the opiate crisis, how doctors are overprescribing, how there's multiple companies involved, how even the cure for the opiate epidemic, some of those things like methadone or Suboxone or Subutex or some of those have been overpushed. And when I lived in Massachusetts 10 years ago, they were over pushing it. I went to a place called HKD, and people would go in there high or drunk, and they would get a prescription. They were shut down right before I moved to New Hampshire, and they didn't give anybody a warning. They just gave them like a whole month's supply of pills, and then when they went back, they were shut down. And that's because they were just a pill pushing clinic. It wasn't really good. Um, so this crisis in America is only one of many. I'm going to explain that this is nothing compared to another crisis that these doctors are creating. What is the mental health crisis? That is, people are losing their minds. And I'll give you how it happens. When you grow up in an orphanage, like your parents either pass away or you're taken from your mother, like me, and put in these orphanages, most of the funding for these orphanages go to one doctor who's downstairs in an office all day. Well, that doctor does get more money by prescribing medications. Now, there is whole systems where these doctors push medications. It's very clear. If you do the research, things like opioids from regular pills, they have a list of medications that they like to push. That, if you need a special medication, if you need antibiotics, yeah, you can go get those at the emergency room, but that's not what the doctors want to prescribe. Now, the reason for this, the reason why you see more of these orphans on loaded up on 10 different antipsychotics at age 4, 5, 6, because these are 5-year-olds. These are 5-year-olds who are being started on all different types of pills before their body, I mean, they just were taken from their mother. Of course, they're going to have some emotional issues, but that doesn't mean you should push drugs on them from age 5 to 18. But of course, that's exactly what happens. This doctor downstairs, who's taking most of the money of this orphanage, also then pushes medications on these children. Now, if a doctor decides that he wants 90% of these 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and 7-year-olds to be on 10 different medications, who says no? If this person does not need these medications, if these medications are hurting them, if the staff are doubling up their medications because people are saying that it's in the orange juice or something like that. Because I know in my own personal case in one of these orphanages, they gave me double the medication on purpose because I put ketchup in my orange juice, and another 5-year-old made up a story. All they had to do was pour out the orange juice. They would have saw ketchup at the bottom, and then they could have saved my body a lot of harm. And that's only a case of double doses. The medications themselves, at a regular dose, can harm people. If a child does not need these medications and you give it to them anyways, it can cause all different types of problems. And if you look at these children who grow up in these orphanages, and then they go through program and program and program the program, the doctors keep on loading them up on medications. And as the medications keep on getting loaded up, they have more problems all the way until they're living in the shelter. I've seen many of these people who grew up in this system, and when they're at age 20, they have bags full of pills. They got like 10, 20 different pills, and they're trying to lug them all around town. There's lots of these people lugging their pills all around from the shelter. And this is where it starts. It starts at the orphanage at age 5, where these doctors just load them up. Now, here's the problem with that. Who's stopping these things? If a doctor decides to push medications on these orphans, on these kids with no parents, who speaks up for them? Who says, no, this kid doesn't need any medication? Nobody. Nobody whatsoever. The doctor gets most of the money for the orphanage, they get most of the funding, and whatever decision they make is not questioned. And this is a big problem in society. We cannot be pushing like 10 different medications on the 5-year-olds who have no parents, no security, and they have no government assistance. They have no protections by law. Their body has no protection. If a 5-year-old in an orphanage is being drugged or being given medications at a regular dose, that's normal. That's okay. Now, I I don't like that, but I've had way worse done to me. I've been given large doses of medication. I've been given more medication than I was prescribed. I've been given double doses. That's my problem. My problem is holding a kid down and giving him his medication twice. My problem is parents pouring Epicac into a cup, calling it extra, and then making them drink 8 ounces of Epicac. My problem with people is that when you give medication to shut them up at the wrong time, the wrong dose, or the wrong amount, if you give 5 of a single pill to your child and then he passes out or he stops breathing, that's my problem. I don't think that any parent or any agency should be giving double medication. They should be drugging them. They should try to make them shut up in the corner and pass them out. And if they wake up with some condition or some disorder, then that needs to be treated. But instead, these programs, these orphans are due to suffer because we don't have a system that's meant to protect them. And that's why, as time goes by, you keep an eye out for this in the next 20 years. I'm telling you, you will see it. You will see more people who have been growing up on these medications, on all these crazy medications that these psychiatrists and these orphan doctors that are supposed to do everything. Because remember, you have one doctor downstairs in charge of 300 kids. So that is a psychiatrist. He's not like a primary care where they give you a physical. There's one psychiatrist who eats up most of the money to try to figure out what to do about 300 children. And they don't really get to know the children. They don't really try to do anything like they do have some therapy. But their go-to is to drug these children. They give them multiple medications, and then they just kind of continue doing that. Well, as time goes by, they load on more and more and more. And as bad parents get control of these medications, as they mistreat these children, then these children get more and more and more drugs put in their system. After years of this, I mean, if you have a 5-year-old in an orphanage who gets put on anywhere from 5 to 10 medications, and then by the time they're 7, they're on 10 medications, and then by the time they're 10, they're with foster families who are doing bad things with the medication. They're giving them extra Epicac. They're messing around with the medication. They're improperly giving the medication. If these hospitals hold the child down and give them double in a row, 30 minutes you take all this medication, and then 30 minutes later they load you up on all this medication again. That causes a lot of disorders, including PTSD. You can get all these problematic disorders, as well as medications have permanent side effects when you do this to somebody who does not need them. And so this is continuing. This is not over with. People are still in orphanages. There's still 5-year-olds with no parents. And the pharmaceutical companies are definitely taking advantage of them. Millions and billions of pills are being pushed down children with no parents' throat. And what happens when they become adults? When you push pills that have horrible side effects, that do horrible things to a child's body, and you push those for 15 years, these people end up nuts, crazy. They can't take care of themselves. Their mind's all messed up. I've met hundreds of these people that went through this system, and they do not look okay. They do not have my intelligence. I was smart enough to stop taking the medication and see the improvement I was having. I would take the medication, I would get worse, I would get worse. I did that for 15 years. I was drugged with double doses of medication as well. That made it very clear that I was getting worse. When they gave me twice the medication in the same hour, oh boy did I feel bad. Oh my God, my body hated it. So I was able to identify that the medication and the drugs were a problem. That helped me get sober as well. When I got sober off of the illegal and the recreational drugs, I was still having a lot of drug problems. and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on as a child. But as an adult, I was able to figure out that these drugs were harming me and that I had to stop, and I did. But the problem is that this is still continuing. You should not have pharmaceutical companies and doctors doing this to 5-year-olds with no oversight. There's no government oversight. There's nobody going in there being like, how do you know this child needs all 10 of these? He's 5 years old. You don't need to do that. He's 7 years old. You don't need to do that. He's 20, he's 20 and now crazy. And that's why when you look on the news, when you're watching the news, and you hear about somebody doing some crazy stuff, listen for them to say, oh, he was on medications as a child, and he had depression, and you'll hear all this every time. Every single time you get a nut, you'll hear about this medication as a child. Well, that is a cause of the mental health crisis. We're drugging children that are growing up in a broken system and have no protections. They don't know how to get their body back. They don't know how to get their sanity back. Luckily, I was able to clear up my mind. I was able to get out of that fog. I was able to stop with the drugs. I was able to get myself better mentally. My physical body health is terrible. My body will never be the same. I'll probably die of liver failure in my 40s. I'll have so many other problems due to being drugged repeatedly. Now, there's all different types of druggings. You can talk about doctors pushing medications on people who don't need them. In my case, you can talk about giving double the medication at the same time. You can talk about over-the-counter medications being forced and abused onto a person. You can talk about giving the child more medication than he's prescribed to try to make him quiet in the corner, and then he stops breathing, or his breathing slows down, or he has a reaction which causes a permanent disorder. You can talk about twisting of the mind, because some parents want Social Security, so they purposely try to twist the mind, leave out the disabilities. They try to kind of brainwash their child so that they can collect. There's a lot of this going on. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in some of my girlfriends who I've got emotional connection with. I've seen it from lots of people at the shelter. I've talked to people who are homeless in multiple communities, and I've watched the news and done research, and it always comes out the same. These people are being drugged on lots of medications at a young age. The medications start causing all different types of problems. They continue to drug these people. They go through a system where they have to live outside, or they're just left in a room for days, or there's just so much going on. As well as there also is physical abuse. A lot of times there is physical abuse, and it goes unchecked with orphans. If an orphan says that he's being abused by his roommate or by a staff, yeah, that complaint will go up, but very little to nothing will be done for that child. The staff will be moved downstairs, but that child's bruises or mental condition doesn't get treated properly. They just say, okay, well, here's some more drugs. And this is causing a crisis. If you think the opiate epidemic was bad, just look at some of these antipsychotic and psychiatrists. The psychiatrists are pushing more medications than the primary cares or the pain doctors. If you think the pain doctors caused a bad crisis, wait till you see the mental health crisis caused by all these psychiatrists drugging people who don't need the medication. And that's not even my problem. That's just an issue that I'm trying to solve in our communities. My problem is a lot bigger than that. Somebody got control of these medications. They weren't properly reporting my side effects. They weren't properly giving me the medication. I was given over-the-counter medications I shouldn't have. I was given such large doses that I was given a permanent neurological disorder where I have seizures, and I've had a problem with my body for 25 years. I mean, there's so much that went on with me. I can't say that it happened to everybody else. It didn't. I can't say that what happened to me happened to all the other orphans. But what I can say is while I was in these orphanages, these doctors prescribe a lot of medication to a lot of the children, and I see bad effects happening to the child. as well as the protocols that they have in place, allow kids to punish each other with these medications. All you have to do is walk up to a staff, say Joey didn't take his meds, and they'll hold Joey down and force down a second dose. And Joey won't know why. Joey took his meds. Joey doesn't know why he's being forced onto the ground and having medications forced down his throat. He has no idea. Well, it's because Michael didn't like that you stole his toy, and now he's getting back at you. And this still continues today. There is no type of guardrails to prevent this from happening to our next generation. There isn't. These doctors have full control over these children, and they can prescribe or make money off of them all they want. If the pharmaceutical companies and doctors want to make money off of a certain population, they always go after the poor and the defenseless. And the orphans who are taken from poor families are poor and defenseless. That's why they're targeted first. Before the pharmaceutical companies and before the psych doctors prescribe medications like this to a smart, fully competent adult, or let's say if you have a son that's 10 years old that always grew up in a household with a mother and father that really, really want their son to do good, they're not going to try to give those medications right away to that son. No, they're not. They're going to wait for the parents to be begging for their son to be drugged or something like that. But the orphanages, absolutely not. They don't have to care one bit. They're a vulnerable population, these orphans, and the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies know it. So, what do they target? They target the people who are poor and have no voice. These children have no voice, and then they become 20, 30, 40 years old, and they don't know how to get a voice. So, they do something stupid. And it needs to stop. This needs to be stopped in its tracks. We cannot ruin millions of people's lives just so a corporation and a group of people can profit. That is wrong. Now, I'm doing something about that. I'm helping my community. I'm getting the word out. I'm writing books. I'm giving people the information on what's going on. I even help parents that are going through this identify what's happened to me, and then they think about what they're doing to their child. I've made a difference. But is anybody else using their voice to make a difference? If one person like me is speaking up and using his voice to make a difference, that's not enough. Society as a whole needs to say, no, we don't want any more crazy people. No, we don't want you to create any more crazy people. No, we don't want any more crazy people to be created. If all of us come and speak up and say they should be more monitored in the healthcare industry and we should have government oversight, these doctors will be in check. But right now, they have free rein to do whatever they want to these orphans, and nobody will ever press charges against these doctors for malpractice. These doctors will never see any consequence for doing this to children. Absolutely not, because we have not built the guardrails or a system to hold doctors accountable for treating the poor, the disabled, or the helpless with medications they don't need. Absolutely not. A child can go into the office, list 10 different side effects. My heart is beating out of control. My leg won't stop moving. My back is hurting. I'm vomiting. If you have any any side effects like that, you know what the doctor will tell you? Oh, okay. Well, I think we're going to give you more of this and more of this and more of this. Okay, have a nice day. And they only give you 5 to 15 minutes to see the doctor. You got 300 kids. Each one gets 5 minutes, and the doctor just writes, give them more. That is not helpful. You're trying to sedate people, and that's it. They're just trying to sedate them and overdrug them as soon as they come in the door. These doctors are not trying to get to know each child on an individual basis. They're not monitoring different reactions in their sickness. They're not trying to monitor any of that. The staff do most of the monitoring. The staff do most of the reporting. And the staff aren't always that good either. They're minimum wage workers. But this is a big problem. We cannot just push medications onto a whole group of people. that are defenseless. This is why you'll see more on the news about the mental health crisis. You're going to see a lot of more people doing stupid things that were on drugs their whole life. We're talking about drugs from age 5 all the way to 40. And by the time they turn 40, if they're still taking all these crazy pills, if they're still following the advice of their psychiatrist, if the psychiatrist is still not listening to the side effects, like if you're on a medication that says side effect, depression and suicidal thoughts. Uh, uh, if you're on a medication that has side effects like depression and suicidal thoughts, and you've been on this medication for years, and you go into your doctor and you tell him these side effects, I have depression and suicidal thoughts, they never, ever, ever take you off the medication causing it. They just give you 3 more. That's it. They give you a medication that causes things, and then they give you more medication to fix those things, and then they give you more medication to fix the things that that medication created. So then it just becomes a big falling down type of issue. It just keeps on going in a circle, and it gets worse. You start him on one medication, side effects are depression and suicidal thoughts. He goes through that for 2 years. Then they add medications to try to cover those because the other medication causes heart palpitations and the person can't sleep. So then they load on some more medications. Then he's waking up with a hangover in the morning and he's lethargic. So then they give him Adderall and Ritalin for his ADHD in the morning so he actually is awake. So now he looks like a frickin' zombie every day. That's a big problem if you take a normal person and you put them through that. A lot of these children in these orphanages, there's nothing wrong with them. But yet they go through this process where the pharmaceutical companies take they take advantage of them. Now, there are some videos that talk about this medication process where you start off on one that causes depression or suicidal thoughts or causes some type of side effect. Then instead of the doctor handling it when you complain about these side effects, they just load you up on 2 more medications. Then those 2 medications cause some side effects. Then they give you another medication. Then that medication causes a side effect. So then they take that medication away and give you 2 medications. Then those medications cause side effects. So they add on another medication. And then you're on, before you know it, 14 medications a day. You're not feeling right. Your mind is not right. Your behaviors aren't right. Your body isn't right. And you don't know why because you're 7 years old. You're 10 years old. Well, this is happening to several people in America. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of orphans who have no voice. They have no protections under law. They have nobody coming in there and saying this is wrong and holding those doctors and those pharmaceutical companies accountable. So when next time you're looking at the news and you hear a crazy person do something and you hear about how they were on medications their whole life, you might want to reconsider why he was on those medications. Is it the chicken or the egg first? Did the medication start first or did the behavior start first? Well, if he's a 5-year-old, you expect 5-year-olds to be hyper. They don't have a fully grown mind. They don't know their body yet. A lot of times, the medication starts first, and then by the time they're 20, their mind starts to go. Unless you fix the issue. The issue is the drugs. We're being drugged. Orphans are being drugged constantly. And that's the issue at hand. The chicken is the person doing the crazy thing. The egg is the drugs themselves. Did the chicken or the egg come first? It was the egg. The egg was the medication. They got drugged for 15 years. By then the time they're 20 or 30, they don't know what to do. And I see this on the news all the time. And people probably don't understand that this is happening unless they lived it. I lived it, so I understand it, and I see it in life, and I almost want to cry for these people. I've met people who are 47 and they're swallowing like 12 pills a day, and they're getting worse when they take these pills, but yet they say, well, I need them. Okay, that's good. If you need them, take them. What do you need them for? Oh, I don't know. You're 47 years old. You're a woman, and you don't know what you're taking all 12 of these for. You got like 3 antipsychotics. You got 2 anxiety meds. You got 1 for pain. You got 1 for sleep. You got 1 for. You have 14 different meds here, and you don't know what a single one is for? No, they just say take it. And when did you start taking these medications? I asked her. Oh, I started when I was in one of these little programs when I was about 7. They started me on them. They said I need them for life. Ah, and you get better when you take these? And they'll usually say, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then if you say, well, what are you feeling right now? They're not getting better. They're hungover. They have a headache. They can't make formal sentences. They can't think straight. They can't cook their breakfast. They can't hold a job. They are not doing better. Then you take away the medication. Over time, the person gets a lot better. All of a sudden, 4 years later, they're holding a job. They have their own apartment. They're able to cook their own breakfast. They're able to take a shower and keep themselves clean. What has changed? They're not being drugged anymore. They were brainwashed into thinking they needed something that they really didn't. Now, there are people out there that really need these, by the way. I have met like people, my roommate across the hall was a real schizophrenic. He really did hear voices. He really did. You could hear him listening to his own voices. He would get in these zones. He really did need medication for schizophrenia, a specific medication for a specific disease that was very clear that he admitted himself over and over, and it was very clear that he had this. But it's very hard to prove or disprove mental illnesses. So for every 1 person that really needs these treatments, there are 10 people that don't need it who are getting it. Keep that in mind. For every 1 person that really needs these medications, there are 10 people who don't need them and are having them forced on them. That's wrong. We need to get some oversight from the government. And that starts with us. We have to speak up. We have to use our voices.